speaking about clothes and and fashion. No, I'm joking. If any of you has a t-shirt that they think it's too small, meaning if you have a large and you think you would need an extra large, Corey would want to trade. So just talk to him about after that. Or if not, we'll just send you one, as I said. So yes, welcome in the last part of the day one of Railsberry. Welcome Corey. Give him a big hand, and I guess that's it.
Hey everybody, I'm going to be talking about breaking into the enterprise, which is kind of an interesting concept, and this is a story of GitHub's enterprise project, which is a Rails application. So, this button does not seem to work. I'm going to drive it by hand. So enterprise is weird. When you come from an open source background, you're almost really averse to saying, hey, I want to pay for something. You know, there's an equal alternative out there that you can get, and so the idea of paying tens of thousands of dollars for a piece of software is really foreign. And it comes with weird connotations. It's almost like a joke in development communities to be like, oh, you work in the enterprise? That sounds horrible. And you have to, as a consumer of an enterprise product, you have to work with these bugs. And you don't get the same release cycle that you get from a web application, and you don't get to deploy all the time. And so customers are sitting there on bugs for a while. SaaS software has risen in popularity, for a variety of reasons, but just basically consumers pay for software that's hosted online. They don't have to host it themselves. It's a whole lot easier. And you can quickly deliver value with a SaaS product. New features are out not on a fiscal year cycle, it's on a day-to-day cycle, or bug fixes can be in the hands of users in a few hours if it's simple. It also has sane pricing. For SaaS stuff, there's no purchase orders required. You don't have to deal with a sales guy who wants to make as much money as he can possibly bleed out of you, even if that means wasting your time. And it's month-to-month billing, and if you don't like it, with SaaS software, you can move on to an alternative. So you're not stuck with this software for years on end because you paid an ungodly amount of money for it. But what if the enterprise could work like SaaS? What if you could sell products that were built for the enterprise, for enterprise consumers, and they were willing to pay enterprise prices for it? But what if we could deliver it and have the developers who are working on it actually, happy and enjoy building the product that we're working on? So this talk is about a little bit about the philosophy behind GitHub Enterprise. It's a little bit about the technology and a little bit about the process that we go through in order to get this in people's hands. My name is Corey Donohoe. I'm Atmos on Twitter. On the web, I'm atmos.org. And I work at github.com. Do you guys know GitHub? Okay, at least you laughed. If you guys have an account, I love you because you allow me to have a really awesome job. And we love building products for you guys. It's basically done a lot of things, but it's simplified collaboration of software. It makes it easier for software developers, especially when they're geographically distributed, to work together, and it definitely helps with facilitating discussion around changes. We have about 1.5 million users now, which is kind of amazing for a development platform. And we also have users that tend to love us. We care so much about keeping those users happy, and 1.5 million people is a pretty big number. We love that. And we've done all of this without taking any external funding. So we figured out how to make a business with it. And I think that we're going to be able to keep our users happy for a long time. But there's problems with GitHub.com for certain businesses. Everyone can't use GitHub.com, and some people can't or won't trust the SaaS model. So, who can't use our site? In a lot of cases, banks, governments, Fortune 500 companies who have really weird restrictions. Sometimes organizational structure leads to this. They have a CTO that's like, we can't trust our source code to an internet-hosted site. We have to have something suboptimal on our own hardware. Or they might have extremely rigid security concerns that it just can't be in our hands. And that's a legitimate problem for people. We're never going to be able to get everyone's source code hosted on github.com. But the trust there varies from organization. Like I said earlier, sometimes it's legal reasons, sometimes it's the comfort level of the people making the decisions, and organization source code is a huge deal. You know, what if you could browse Facebook's code? You know, like something like that would be kind of crazy. But in the Ruby on Rails community, there's so little appeal to the enterprise that they just, you know, people are like, why even bother? Why would you deal with these people who move slowly and all of this? And, you know, it's kind of rad the way that we've started to deal with it, because we can make a lot of money by talking to these people. And, you know, if we can make a lot of money off this, that means we can make .com better. And so we really should investigate this. So here's a little bit of history. This has come from the last 2 years or so, or I guess 3 almost, of working on FI, and it's taken us a long time to streamline all of this process for us delivering our enterprise product. So in June of 2009, we launched a thing called GitHub Firewall Install, and it was GitHub FI. And we shipped a subset of the overall GitHub.com functionality with GitHub FI. And we used this thing called BitRock, which packaged it up, and it was an off-the-shelf thing that I believe we partnered with them to get better rates or something like that. But it allowed us to give people an installer. And so we could say, here you go, here's GitHub. You can install it inside your firewall, so you feel good. And we used JRuby for the runtime environment on there. The cool thing about BitRock is that it had this awesome Java runtime stuff where we could use JRuby and compile our Ruby code into class files and ship the class files. So we didn't have customers digging into their FI install and going, oh, this is how GitHub works. I can, you know, dig through and maybe find a mass assignment vulnerability or something like that. You know, and this kept our code safe from people reading it. But there's drawbacks, because it's actually really hard to ship an application to people and say, here's a complex application with a bunch of moving parts. You can just install it on your hardware. Cutting a release was hard, and the test suite was basically non-existent because our stuff doesn't run very well on JRuby because of various reasons. And people, you know, really didn't understand what FI meant. So when you said, do you have GitHub FI, they just kind of look at you crooked. And JRuby doesn't work the same way as GitHub.com, and so we had runtime discrepancies. And it turns out it's actually really, really hard, because when we started doing this, we said, oh, we'll just have a branch, and FI will be in this branch, and we'll make all our changes there. But when we were adding new features to .com, we had to cherry pick all of those features over into the FI branch, and these two things just kind of got further and further apart. And so the code bases diverged. We also had people problems. So Zach was the only person working on FI for a long time. And you had people like Chris Wanstroth and Ryan Tomeko and Rick Olson just hammering out features on .com. And it's like, hey, Zach, you're really talented, but good luck keeping up with those guys. And especially when your merge strategy is cherry picking. And so we had technical guys doing multi-month enterprise sales, and they hated it. They would much rather be coding rather than following up with somebody. And, you know, the quick release cycles that we had on .com weren't there. So bugs lingered for a while. So at one point we said, let's kill it. Like, let's just not do FI anymore because it's not worth our time. This is such a maintenance nightmare, and we, you know, won't make a bunch of money off this. We're kidding ourselves, you know, and we seriously discussed killing it. You know, we had to support existing installs. And since we had that existing user base, that never really happened. We were in over our heads at that point. And we had a bad feeling about it, so we started rethinking things. And then so probably about 18 months ago, we started thinking about it, and we were still selling FI at the time, but at that point we'd gone from about 9 employees to almost 20. And guess how many developers we had on FI? Still 1. So it was kind of horrible. So now we have even more talented people hammering out features on GitHub.com and 1 person trying to keep up. But we did get a dedicated salesperson at that point, so that freed up the people who were dealing with salespeople that they didn't really want to. And Zach had this wonderful idea. He said, I'm not going to use BitRock anymore. It might take me a little bit of time, but I'm going to use Chef. And the Ops Code Chef platform is really rad. And so when we moved away from BitRock to Chef, it had this wonderful cascading effect on the whole project, because we were like, hey, maybe we don't have to use crappy tools or tools that are frustrating. Maybe we can start thinking differently about FI. And naturally we said, hey, do we really need JRuby? Like, what if we can just enforce that people can't stand up an FI install and rebrand it and say, hey, this is some GitHub competitor? We can enforce that with legal reasons. So it's like, maybe we don't need this class obfuscation that we thought we did. And if we shipped on MRI, then maybe we could have a test suite for it, and that would be kind of great. So this guy who works with us named Aman Gupta had this wonderful idea, and he said, we just can't have these two things anymore. And he goes, it's only like a 25,000 line diff. And we were just, okay. He's like, I'll do it, you know. And so he powered through it, but we started chipping away at combining the two code bases, and that required us to take a step back sometime and say, hey, how are we actually going to maintain this? How can GitHub.com source code be shipped to the users? And by unifying the two code bases, it made us start thinking about things properly. And so the other thing is we rebranded FI to Enterprise, because if you throw Enterprise on it, you can charge a whole lot more money for it, apparently, and people know what it means. But the new outlook was that the two code bases should play well together. And Enterprise features should never negatively impact GitHub.com, and GitHub.com should be able to have, new features on .com should be delivered and able to be in the hands of enterprise users in at least a day. And we can do that. So, we looked at how we can work better together. Everything needs to be well tested on enterprise. Not having tests was so miserable because you couldn't really change things and know. You actually had to spin it up and click through, and those days are gone. You shouldn't be working that way anymore. So let's see, cutting releases and bug fixes needs to be smooth too. If we have an enterprise customer and they're giving us a bunch of money, they don't want to hear that it's going to be 3 months before they get the bug fix, especially if it really screws up their ability to use the product. But so to think about it, GitHub is a pretty big app, and it's built on pretty much all open source software. GitHub and Enterprise both run on this stack. So we run on Ruby 1.8.7 with RE, which is pretty solid for us. Rails 2.3.14, so this is probably ancient history to everybody here, but we still use it, and part of our upgrade from 2.2 to 2.3.14 was based on trying to unify these two code bases and get FI on something sane. We use MySQL 5.1 from Percoma. Despite the fact that everybody loves NoSQL databases like crazy, MySQL just chugs along for us and is generally not one of our scaling points of frustration. It's pretty solid if you have knowledgeable people working on it, and the Percona guys are available for contracting and well worth every dime. We use Redis 1 and 2. So we have separate servers for separate needs. The Redis 1 server is legacy, and it's basically a huge hash table. So every time you make a request into the website and you say, hey, I want the Rails project, it does a little check in Redis, and it comes back and says, oh, that's on file server 13. And so it just routes it over there, and that's essentially all we're using Redis 1 for anymore. Redis 2, we're actually using a slightly more sophisticated setup that's doing basically maintaining indexes into MySQL for some gigantic tables where maintaining indexes synchronously is very difficult. But we're also using PubSub and a whole bunch of other things. So the Redis 2 server is a whole lot beefier and much more general purpose for the way that we're using it. One of the cool things we're doing in Enterprise is we're using GPG for license management. And so we need a way to say, hey, you didn't pay us. You paid us last year, but the year's up and you got to pay again. We need some way to basically safely turn it off. And GPG turned out to be an open source piece of software that we could use to manage all of these licenses. And so it was a really natural fit there. But that whole class obfuscation thing on JRuby comes back to this really awesome piece of software called Ruby Encoder. So you can get this, and it obfuscates and encrypts your source code. And so you get essentially bytecode for Ruby and it's cheap. It's like $150. And so you can do that and basically obfuscate all your source code and ship it to people and not worry about them reading it and learning something from it or identifying weird stuff in your source code. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's 119 euros. But it allowed us to run the same runtime as Ruby or as GitHub.com, which was great because we had all of these things kind of coming together. And the other cool thing that we created were these things called GitHub packages, so .ghp files. And so these are awesome because it includes the source code for essentially a release of .com and the chef recipes that are necessary to bring the system into a state that's ready to run the application. And so it's similar to like a WAR file or a jar or something like that that you would just deploy in a Java environment. And so on GitHub.com, we have over 60 physical servers. So .com itself doesn't run on any cloud provider right now. We're real machines that are expensive, and someone has to go put them somewhere. And so when you have this like huge environment, how do you collapse that into something that you can give to somebody? How do you say, well, you're going to need 60 boxes with somewhere between 64 and 96 gigs, and you're going to need a lot of cores, and that's really expensive to do. And so we have this horizontally scalable infrastructure, and what we needed to be able to do was collapse that into one server for people. And we need to make sure that the deployments for these users is brain dead. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare supporting them. So we started looking, and we were like, well, let's just use virtual machines. And they're pretty widely adopted. There's a sane setup, and let's even go further and say we're only going to target one distribution. So let's not support CentOS 4, which is basically as old as a Debian release. Let's just use Ubuntu. And let's say we're only going to target Ubuntu, and let's see if people even know or care. And it turns out they don't. So we deployed all of GitHub.com onto this one VM. And so we distribute these things in what's called an OVF format. So it's open virtualization. This is supported by all of the large virtualization solutions. So VMware, VirtualBox, IBM apparently has one. It's called Power. I didn't know that they did. But Chef is going to manage all the configuration for these. So from a standalone Ubuntu install to a running system, Chef can spin all of that up for people. And what's rad about this idea is that it's primed to run in the cloud. So if people don't want to host their VMs anymore, we might be able to have a cloud product on top of this too that we could sell. We're not doing that yet, but it'd be very cool for us to be able to do that. And I hope it's something that we think about pursuing in the future. And the other thing that was crazy and very different from the normal way that enterprise sales works is we said, let's make it really easy to get to people. Like, let's take everybody out of the cycle if we possibly can. And so sign up. People go to enterprise.github.com. Pretty easy. And so it's very easy. You don't have to talk to a human if you don't want to. And let's say we give them a 45-day free trial. So let's give them a license. Let's give them an install. Let's see if they can get it going. And it turns out that this is a really good filter for whether or not the customer is going to be problematic. If they can't get it going in 45 days and they've wasted 45 days of your time, they're probably not going to be happy over the course of the year for that license sale. And so yeah, they can go there, they can download a copy of the VM that they can install into whatever virtualization setup they want, and they can get the latest GHPs. And GHPs are cut anytime a bug fix or a new feature lands on GitHub.com. So let's say we what did we do recently? I don't know. Remove the inbox. So we don't have messaging on GitHub.com anymore because people tend to just use email. And so when we removed that, the same day we were able to cut a GHP and have enterprise users have those same features. And it's also great when they have errors and the enterprise support guys will come to us. We're able to just immediately respond the same way that people are used to getting a timely turnaround in a SaaS product. But like I was saying, support's able to fill out clients during this install. And in a lot of cases, we just need to work through that initial setup of getting people going, and then it just chugs right along. And it's really kind of cool. And this ensures that the technical relationships are solid. You don't have generally an executive buying enterprise. It's usually some guy who's trying to sneak it into his company and replace some ancient system that they're using. The other thing that's cool is that this simplifies the sales process. You can buy GitHub Enterprise with a credit card for like $5,000. You can have 20 users on the site. And so what's cool is if you know what you're doing and you have a small shop and you want your own GitHub, it's you can go there and run a credit card and you're good to go. It's kind of great. And what's cool about that is now we have two salespeople who actually have a very technical background, so they're great for dealing with people, but they actually like selling stuff, which is cool. And this frees them up because they're able to work those long month-to-month deals with the larger organizations, and the people who are just like, take my money. They're not busy dealing with them, going through hoops because of just general protocol. And what's cool is Developers working on .com can build new features, and enterprise users get them for free. They just are waiting for them, and it's really rad. And the GHP provides quick and simple upgrade paths. So all of the cool things that are happening, those customers can feel, I think they should feel better about the purchase because they know that they can get all the cool stuff that we're building almost immediately. And the process for helping enterprise users, we get improvements on .com every day. There are tiny bugs in every direction, and when you have 1.5 million users, somebody hits them a few times a day. And so we have to talk to them and identify what weird situation got them into that and how they can and how we can fix it. And so we work with support staff to identify the issues. Routinely, people kind of have different parts of the system that they're responsible for. The support guys know, I generally work on billing with a guy in Belgium. And if there's a billing problem, they come to one of us. And it's cool because the enterprise guys are now doing that with support. So the enterprise guys are coming over and saying, oh, hey, this user gets the system into this state. How do we fix this? And it's like, oh my gosh, we found a bug. And so we're able to work with the enterprise support guys the exact same way, rather than those kind of weird organizations where it's like, oh, well, you're on the enterprise team, and it's probably just enterprise because it's different. When it's the same code base, everybody has the same vibe that it needs to be fixed. Because if it's affecting someone on enterprise, 9 times out of 10, it's probably affecting something on .com. And so we auto-deploy our code via a tool that we have that once our build passes, code automatically goes out. And so that's a really rad feature, and we want that on enterprise too. And so that's something we're working towards. Bug fixes, like I was saying, we work with the support staff. They usually, we have enterprise support guys that open pull requests now, because our support guys are actually pretty technical and talented developers too. And so they'll be like, oh, this guy has this weird case when you log in with LDAP on Windows, LDAP, and some other stuff I can't even fathom. And they'll just create a pull request and be ready to go. And so they can actually do it. And one of the .com developers will look at it and say, oh yeah, this looks good. It won't negatively affect .com, so let's go ahead and merge it. And they can get that change right back out to the users. We have discussions around our pull requests. Basically, every pull request is automatically built, so we know the status of that branch, and we can look at it, do a quick spot check, discuss it if it's a larger feature, and merge it in. But we basically, merge GitHub's master branch and deploy it in .com. Enterprise cuts a new release of the GHPs, and enterprise user can download it from the site almost immediately. So we don't even have to send it to them. Like the enterprise site, if you have an account, you can log in and see what's available. And so we're winning basically because there's a unified process there. Everything, despite the fact that it's targeted at a different user and there's some code complexities around there, having it all on the same code base is extremely advantageous. And like I was saying, there's no organizational finger pointing. It's those crazy enterprise guys again. And I think that's kind of the key for us is one code base to rule them all. Like having long-lived divergent branches is just horrible. It's a maintenance nightmare, and eventually you'll want to kill everybody. One process where the stakeholders are all involved and they're all really passionate about fixing things. Everybody knows that a bug needs to be fixed. Like we don't just sit on those. And it's kind of rad to know that everybody in the organization is passionate about building the best GitHub.com that we can. And so, every person in your organization should feel empowered to make your end users happier. If you see people griping, we sit there and keep an eye on people mentioning GitHub on Twitter. And we may not reply, but we see everything that goes by. And we just want to make sure that everybody stays happy. And if we see a few people report the same bug, then we will probably look into it. Simplifying collaboration, being able to work really well together and not have separate groups that are responsible for things is an extremely powerful thing. But you need to figure out what works best for your organization in any case. Simplifying deployment is such a huge thing. Automated testing is so rad. It sounds like the Travis guys have a pro version now, so you can look into that stuff. But having that idea that everything is in a good state and shippable at any moment is really, really awesome. And even with our GHP stuff, we deploy that the same way we deploy the site. We say, cut enterprise build. And Hubot fires off a task that hits a little web service that builds it all and uploads it, and then he's like, I'm done. And it's super cool because everybody's using the same process to deliver stuff. And what's cool in the enterprise world is this means that we can make more money. So this is rad because I really like taking enterprise people's money. I think other SaaS products can do this too, though. Whether you're trying to white label your app or something like that, but being able to think about taking your application and deploying it on more than just your current environment and figure out how you could get it into other users' hands. It turns out to be a really powerful way of selling your software. So that's it. Thanks a lot. Oh, one more thing. I left a bunch of stickers out on the chairs over lunch, and I don't know if you guys got them, but if you didn't, I have a few more. So they're kind of rad stickers. So you can find me after this, and I'll hook you up.
Do you have questions? Yes.
I have a question about this release process, deployment process for enterprise. You mentioned these packages. I'm just wondering how big such package or packages could be. How much data a customer needs to download?
It's usually less than 250 megs. So for that update, you're basically getting a new checkout of the source code and all the gems and everything that you need. Like we cache all the gems. And that's kind of why we have the VMs and the GHPs separated. So the VM is just, this is what you can start with. And then from there, all of the recipes for building up the system and the source code is right around 250 megs.
And for such customer, for example, how much time they need, except download, of course, how much time they need to update it?
Oh, it's a few minutes. Like fewer than 10.
Thank you.
Someone here?
Yeah, hey. Regarding those packages as well. Yeah, you're a
Mystery voice.
do you eat your own dog food here? Meaning, would you build those packages and then deploy it to your own server as well? Or is this something that is getting built after you deploy it to your own production servers and it's just shipped to the customer?
It's generally, we ship all day. I mean, it's not uncommon that there's somewhere between 30 and 50 deploys in a day. So things are probably already out before that. We auto-deploy a green master branch. When master is green and done, it just automatically goes out. So the thing is, in the traditional Capistrano type deployment, you actually say, oh, everything's good, cap production deploy. And we still have that type of workflow for cutting enterprise releases, mainly because if there aren't bug fixes that people are noticing or significant features, it's not worth the time to build a new one, use the disk space to store it on S3 and all of that. So those guys still manually trigger it when there's a reason to cut a new enterprise release.
And so how about virtual images and how do you do upgrades on it? And about the data, do you have anything that to make it secure, that like you don't lose it because of the hardware failure?
No. That's not there yet. It's you can set up mirroring for your Git repos, which is generally a good solution, but we don't have. This has been out, I guess, since last October, and right now we're not aggressively looking at upgrading the VM because the packages are recent enough that we don't have to worry too much. I'm not familiar enough with what the plans are for upgrading data in the future. The beauty is that you can actually spin up a brand new VM. Like say you wanted to upgrade, you could spin up the other VM and say, okay, how's everything working? It's like, oh, you know what? I need to just duplicate all the MySQL data. And it's your box, you have access to it. So you can log in, pipe all the MySQL data over, pull all your Git repos over, evaluate that new VM, and say, oh yeah, everything's good to go, let's turn the other one off. But let's keep it around just in case, because it's cheap. It's just disk space at that point. And so that strategy I think is generally better for people than us trying to build a system around automating those upgrades rather than giving them something practical where it's like, you know what, you are not going to lose anything because you're just going to spin a new one up. And that's kind of the beauty of virtualization. It's like, well, you need to get a second box. It's like, nah, I don't really. It's like, you can do it a whole lot simpler. And I think that upgrade path might be the suggested path, but I don't really know. I haven't worked closely enough with people doing that.
But do the enterprise clients like replicate the database to make sure that they don't lose it?
There are certain customers that have external MySQL DBs. I think that we're trying to convince them that that's a bad idea, but some people do it anyway, and they have access to the box, so they can pretty much get away with it. But there's nothing like that yet. We probably should have that, but right now that's something that's left up to the user to decide on a backup strategy.
Any more questions? No?
There's one dude
One
waiting
more?
to say it.
Oh, okay. One more over there. One more over there. You should speak to the mic.
I've got a question about data migration. How did you handle data migration from GitHub FI to GitHub Enterprise?
Same way the website works. So it's part of running migrations is part of those chef recipes. So you have to be smart. People do things in migrations that turn out to be terrible sometimes. Like doing crazy data manipulation or something, and they don't understand that, migration 6 and migration 10 were run a week apart, but if you run them in succession, something awkward can go on. So we have to be a little smart about that. But they just get run when the GHP is installed. So it's part of the normal code installation, upgrade, process restart type mechanism.
I just wondered, now that you've gone from GitHub FI to GitHub Enterprise, have you seen like a massive 1,000-fold increase of users?
I don't know. I track it in a very weird way, which is usually just keeping an eye on sales. And since I work on the billing stuff, I know that more people are buying it with credit cards than we anticipated, which is kind of cool. But I think that it's generally word of mouth type stuff where organizations are starting to hear about this product and the fact that they can go and learn about the product and then they're like, oh, there's an enterprise thing. That fits our organization's model. We have enterprise things. And so they can go to it rather than, if they're scrolling through and they see GitHub FI, they just go right by it. So it's a little bit of marketing.
Final question?
Yeah, hi. It's not really a technical question. I'm just wondering, is it GitHub Enterprise now a significant part of your business, or?
User base wise, no way. But
like in terms of revenue, is it?
I don't know offhand. Sorry.
Cool. No problem.
Yeah, that was it.
One last
Did you
question.
One final one? Okay, yeah. One final one.
Right, sorry, it's me again.
Mr. Voice.
Yeah, here.
I see you.
How often does it happen that a customer is reporting a bug and you're just like, did you install the latest update? Is that a common problem there?
I don't think so. I'm
Customers
not
are willing-
I'm not the first line of defense on interacting with the enterprise customers, though. So
Right.
that may be pretty common. Most of the people, they don't feel like they need to upgrade all the time.
That's exactly our
technical
experience.
people tend to be like, oh my gosh, the new thing is out, I must have it. But a lot of people are like, oh, it's working. And unless it's a huge feature, that they're like, hey, you have this thing on the site, but I don't have it on my install. And then you'd say, hey, you should just upgrade. But we don't have many people. Most of the bugs that we ran into after the last round were opening up to more enterprise-y type authentication systems like LDAP and CAS and Shibboleth and all these other things, which strangely enough OmniAuth supports like 90% of them. But debugging all of that was a nightmare because it's inside someone's organization and going back and forth with logs. And so those types of issues, I think we've gotten most of them hammered out, but it took a good bit of yes, A, do you have do you have the latest code? And B, okay, I'm gonna need you to give me the contents of this log. And we're gonna go from there. And so it's a lot of our customers are, like our .com users, they're actually really pleasant to work with. And I'm pretty glad that we are, that we have them.
Right, thanks again.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. And everybody give Corey a big hand. So somebody, yeah, as soon as I put it, yeah.